Aloha, I'm Leslie Tagorda, Aquarius boss woman, brand astrologer, and designer. Not long ago, I was an unseen business owner playing small. Then, using my astrology chart, I uncovered the luminary I was meant to be. Now I help entrepreneurs like you use astrology in practical ways to crystallize your brand visibility for brilliance, impact, and reach. We are currently in a huge global pivot, and it's your time to be a leader, your time to show up for your community and contribute your magic in the world. I believe you are here to shine brightly online like the luminary you are meant to be. Hey, luminaries. I'm super excited about our episode today. I'm presenting our very first guest on the Savvy Luminary. She is a superstar astrologer. And last year, she invited me to be on her podcast. And that was the very first podcast I had ever been a guest on. And it really just opened my business up. And I'm just so delighted to have her as my very first guest. She is the owner of Soul Shine Astrology and has a wildly popular podcast, the Cosmic Calling Podcast on Spotify. You already probably follow her and know about her, the beautiful Natalie Walstein. What she says is that she serves creative souls on a mission to align their life and career with the cosmos, as well as spiritual entrepreneurs wanting to turn their calling into a strategic business and marketing strategy that brings greater success and abundance. She helps them serve more people with their soul gifts. I hope you enjoy today's episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. You know, we kind of went on a little bit over the time that I had in mind, but it was just so much fun to connect with another astrologer. Astrologers are some of my favorite people because we get to talk about all the things that bring us passion and see astrology from a different perspective because we all interpret charts a little bit differently. So we talk about Natalie's journey into astrology and into her business. We talk about how visibility, how it was initially a little slow start, and then she just caught on like wildfire. And then she's going to be giving us tips on how we can gain more visibility and get aligned with our passions through astrology. Oh my gosh, I'm super excited for this interview and hope you enjoy. Hello, everybody. It is Leslie Tagorda, your brand astrologer and designer here. And we have our very first guest ever. And I am breathing into my excitement because here we have with us the superstar astrologer of Soul Shine Astrology, Natalie Walstein. Welcome and aloha, Natalie.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Oh my gosh, me too. Natalie, would you like to share kind of a little story of how we met each other?
Yeah, Leslie reached out to me to tell me we were kind of like doing similar things, which I thought was really cool. And I had her on my podcast. People loved our episode together, talking about branding and astrology and geeking out on all the stuff we both love. And she came out here and we had lunch together in Honolulu because she's from here. And we've had a beautiful friendship ever since. I'm so grateful.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am so grateful too. You know, Natalie has this amazing podcast that I'm sure you already know about, Soul Shine Astrology. And when I was just kind of putting together my branding business and implementing astrology into that framework, I reached out to her and asked her if I could be on her podcast. And gosh, Natalie, you're just so gracious and generous. And then when I found out that she was moving to my hometown where my family and I go visit often, I was like, I have to meet her in person. So it's been quite a fun year, kind of our little connections here and there.
Yes, I love cheering each other on, and like I can't do this work alone. You can't do this work alone. And so I think it's nice when people can come together who do similar things and just like boost each other up, you know? The world could use more of both of what we do.
100%. What is that saying about a tide raises all ships?
Yeah, rising tide or
Yes.
lifts all ships, I think is what it is.
Thank you. So, Natalie, do you want to share your journey into kind of entrepreneurship, like how you got started in astrology and, all the different challenges that you might have had?
Yeah, wow. So I started my first business when I was about 22, and I'm 30 now. So that was 8 years ago, which is crazy to think about. And I always knew I wanted to run my own business because both of my parents ran their own businesses. So it was never a thought in my mind that I would be working like a 9 to 5 job, although I have done that too. But it was my very last 9 to 5 job that I had started my business at on the side. I was an in-house graphic designer for a fashion company. And on the side, I was designing magazines for freelance clients. And I had 5 magazines that I was working on at one point. And so I did that for about 5 years. And I loved it. Like, that's what I wanted to do since I was 8 years old. And so I was always like, I'm going to art school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my own business. So, like, that was always on my mind. However, 5 years in, I ended up moving to Hawaii. And Hawaii has this weird effect on people. I'm not the only one who says this. You like want to slow down. You want to be more in tune with nature. You don't want to hustle as much. And I went through this like breaking down of everything in my life, like my relationship, my home, my career, my health, everything fell apart. And that's when I really started to get more into astrology, which I'd always been into. I just didn't know it could be a real job or a real career. And it was through looking at my chart that I realized, wow, like maybe I should be an astrologer and I can help people with their career the way it was helping me with mine. And so I've been doing that ever since. So it's been about 3.5 years since I've done career astrology, which is really about helping people do what they're born to do and get paid for it and not settling for less than what's like really fills them up and fulfills them on a more meaningful level. And so, yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Oh my gosh, I love so many things about that story. So, can we go all the way back to your 9 to 5 time?
Yes.
So, knowing that, like, kind of you had these entrepreneurial roots from your parents, what was that like to work a 9 to 5 job?
Terrible. Like I was so excited when I got that job because it was my first salaried job, and I never imagined myself doing that. But my business wasn't quite at the state where I could do it full time yet. And so, like, every day I wanted to quit. I felt like a slave. I was like, I have to be there from 9 to 5. Like, my bosses were so nice, though. Like, there was nothing bad about where I worked. It was just something within me that's like, I cannot. Like, what I really wanted was I wanted to combine my personal development and my spiritual development with what I did for work. I wanted it to be the same thing. I didn't want to be a different person in one place and another person in, like, at home. And so, like, my Mercury's in Aquarius. I'm really rebellious. I like want to do things my own way. But I also like cried when I set my boss aside and I quit. Like, and I had decided the night before. I was like, I have to quit tomorrow. And a lot of that was because my business was doing really well. And so I was basically working 2 full-time jobs. And a lot of people I work with want to quit their day job. And it is really hard. You really do kind of need to hustle. Like, I hate that word and I wish it wasn't that way, but the truth of the matter is, like, you, if you want to support yourself and run a beautiful business, sometimes in the very beginning you do have to work a lot harder. And so that's what I did until it was like very clear I was making the same amount from my clients and my design business as I was at my job. And then I was like, okay, it's time.
Nice. So you actually had this kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel. You knew exactly what it was the trigger for you to quit, and you got there and you're like, I'm done.
Yes and no. I probably should have had more savings. I was planning to stay there for a year, but I quit after 3 months because I was like, my soul just like couldn't deal.
Oh, wait, you only had your 9 to 5 for 3 months?
Yeah, but I worked many other jobs before that.
Because I also had a 9 to 5, and I did it for about 5 years. Like the very first year and a half was like really awesome. And I was in San Francisco, and I was actually had a tech job where I was designing training materials to be delivered on the web. So that's how I kind of got my foot into web design. And then the .com, the very first .com happened. Um, and I think you were probably still like pretty young when that happened. But I was already like the beginning of my career, and I was like, the next job that I got, I hated it so much. It was like this gray, dingy, like all of these cubicles, like if you could, and fluorescent lighting. It was like the most horrible job ever.
No.
And I, like you, and I quit. I didn't really have savings, but I just had this like optimism. I think I when I was looking at your chart, I think that was like your Sagittarius rising, right? It's just like everything is going to work out. I'm just going to do it. Take this leap of faith.
Yeah, sometimes that gets you in trouble too. I've started to learn as I've gotten older, but it definitely got me, like, it's gotten me to really good places more often than not.
Yes, yes. I managed to have paid off all my debt. I had like no debt when I started my business, but everybody was like, and it was also at like a recession. They were like, you can't start a tech job during a tech recession and this and that. And my Sagittarius moon was just like, oh, forget this. And I still remember like the joy that I felt when I left that tunnel of cubicles for the last time. I still remember how happy I was.
Yes, that's how you know you're on the right track. We're not supposed to feel like our soul is being crushed, you guys.
I love that. That's how you know when you're on the right track. No soul crushing jobs.
Yes.
So, when you were kind of looking at your astrology to find some answers, which I find super interesting too, I'll share my little story after you share yours. You were kind of at this low point of what to do next, and you looked at your chart. What did you find there that you were like, oh my gosh, this is it, I need to move in this direction?
I think the biggest thing for me was that I have my sun and moon in Pisces in my third house of social networking, and social networking can be graphic design. So, like, I was doing that. However, there's like this whole other side to being a Pisces, which is like I'm very empathic, very in tune with my emotions. I'm very intuitive. I had all actually been like dreaming about things before they happened. And a lot, like, my mom and my grandmother are also very spiritual. My mom like gave me tarot readings when I was 8, and I always thought they were super cool. But I was kind of shutting that side of myself off. I would join female entrepreneur groups, and I'm like, I feel different. I feel like I'm different from these people, but I didn't realize it's because I'm like witchy, I guess. Which I don't normally call myself that, but compared to the other people, like, yes, that's I was a mystical one. But I'd been kind of shutting that off, and like I had so many signs and I was ignoring them. And like I think that's why I was so sick too, because I just wasn't in tune with the truth of who I was. And also, just being a Sagittarius rising, my job is to be a guide to other people and share what fascinates me. And what fascinated me is spirituality. Like, I had deadlines to do for my graphic design business, and I would be like learning about angels and like medium work and all sorts of things, and I didn't want to go to work. So that's a really good sign too, that maybe you should actually do the thing you love learning about.
Yes. Were you seeing like angel numbers at the time too, by the way?
Oh my gosh, I had so many crazy experiences. I read this book about angels, and the next morning I woke up with a feather in my hair.
Oh my gosh. Do you know which angel might have left that feather?
I don't. I think it was just like, yes, we're real.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. I love this kind of stuff. I wouldn't call myself witchy either. And kind of my path to spirituality is based in superstition because, like in Hawaii, if you mentioned this kind of idea of slowing down, but Hawaii is like so entrenched in mythology and superstition from all of these different cultures. And so being raised in that, it was just kind of like this given that the tree or the rock would have some kind of spirit.
Yeah, it's true. I've experienced that as well. Like a rock told me to move back to Hawaii when I left. I was like, okay. And they told me to learn Reiki. Like a rock. I swear. It's so crazy, but it's true.
I know when you're like trying to tell like regular people that this rock told you, like you're like, oh my gosh, I must sound crazy. But when you're telling me, I'm like, yeah, of course a rock would tell you.
Yeah, it does sound so crazy, but like I'm past the point of caring, you know? Like I've been doing this long enough where I'm like, if you think it's weird, that's on you, but you'll learn eventually.
Yes. I know with my business, my web design business, there was a in right around in 2018, the middle of 2018. I've been doing my business for probably like 14 years by then, and I was like, oh, this is such a drag. It felt soul crushing, like you were saying. And I was really lost. I didn't know what to do, how to pivot. I mean, there's part of me that loved design work. And I noticed that the clients that I was attracting, like they would take years to finish their websites. They would take, like they felt so stuck. And I was like, oh, being the spiritual person I was, I'm like, oh my gosh, I must be a reflection of that. That's why I'm attracting that. Like you, I kind of looked at my astrological natal chart and I was like, oh, I hadn't looked at my chart in quite a while. Whereas when I was younger, I was looking at it all the time, discovering new things. And I had this aha moment at like my lowest part when I was like thinking about how I want to evolve my web and branding business. And when I looked at my chart, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a branding framework right here, and went to work and like really discovered how to put together other businesses brands based on their natal chart, and it's been so satisfying ever since.
Yes, it's so fascinating how our chart can give us all the answers and help us feel more confident. Because, like you're saying, you really can spend years working on a website, but when you feel confident about it, you get things done and you move forward, which your chart helps you do.
Yes, when you're very clear on like which direction you're supposed to go.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about your visibility, right? You are a superstar. Like you're officially, what do they call those? An Instagram celebrity, right? Like
Oh,
officially, because I think there's like they have metrics of who's a celebrity and who's not, and you're officially an Instagram celebrity. And but I know that it's been a process, maybe a short process, but could you talk a little bit about what was your path to visibility? If there was like any breakthroughs? Like, how were you feeling before? How do you feel now?
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I don't think of myself that way, but that's awesome. I think I started my Instagram like where everyone else does at 0 followers, right? And I would post for months and I get like 10 likes and I'd be happy about it. So I think it's important to just like compete with yourself instead of other people
Mm-hmm.
because, there's so many people who have way more than I do, right? But we're only really here to compete with ourselves. And it's not even like a real competition because like followers doesn't equal money necessarily if that usually
Yes.
that's your goal when you have a business. But basically my advice to anyone who's just starting out is just to keep going and be consistent. I know everyone hears that all the time, but it's true. And the way to be consistent is to love what you're doing and what you're sharing and have fun with it. And like I take a lot of time to put my graphics together because I enjoy it. Writing is something that's always come pretty natural to me. So I just sit down and writing is fun and easy for me. But if it isn't, like find a way to make it fun because ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to experience exponential growth. In the beginning, it can be like, oh my gosh, I've been at 100 followers for like 3 months, and I get like, oh, I'm at 102. Now I'm at 105, and then it goes back to 102, and it's so easy to get frustrated with that, and I totally understand that. I have been through that like anyone else. But what's really going to start bringing people in is actually collaborating. So it wasn't until I joined like a little goddess pod, we called ourselves, and we would comment on each other's posts and like them, and that even just that sense of community of being like, wow, I know people are going to comment on this, helps you want to keep showing up even if like you only have like 10 people in there, you only got 10 more likes, but it like kind of like inspires you to want to keep going. And then eventually people would come to me and feature me and want to do giveaways with me, or share my work. And then then you get like 5,000 in a week, and before you're like wanted one. So it
Wow.
changes really quickly though, and it can be overwhelming because you can be like, I really want this, and then you wake up and you have like 50 DMs and you're kind of freaking out about it. So I think the slow growth is really actually a gift, because you might not be ready for it if it blows up immediately.
Yeah, well, I love what you just shared here, because you not only shared, it's like, okay, like visibility is kind of like the long game and showing up consistently, right? Like we hear this and we're like, no, we're going to be different. And that's not the case. But I also love what you said about like the strategy behind it, about what that lovely little, the name that you called it, the Goddess Pod. I love that so much. And all the partnerships that you created to collaborate, and the rising tide again raises all ships. So like there was, you were doing all of the right things. And then all of a sudden, like wildfire, it was like your visibility is like, boom.
Yeah, it's true. It really can happen that quickly. And relationships are everything. Like that's actually what social media is you're building a relationship with people. You just don't necessarily know them, but they're still getting to know you. And that's really what it's all about. And it's important not to forget that.
Right. And I think one of the other things about that, like what you're, just to go off of the relationships part, right? Like on social media, you're thinking, okay, I just have to like add content, add content, add content. But that's not really a relationship,
Yeah, you're
right?
speaking to people. There's
Hmm.
real people like laying in bed, like sitting on the toilet, sitting on the couch, wherever they are, waiting for their kid to come out to pick them up from school.
It's true. And then, but then also like putting out content, but then also responding to other people's content. Like that's a huge part of creating those relationships.
Yeah, that's why your Instagram profile is so important, because you want to like have a name that people would want to click on because they're like, what is this? And a lot of people overlook that. But like, which one are you most likely to click on? Like a business name that sounds like cool, or just a person's name who you don't know? So that's one part. And then your bio really should be like, this is what you can expect to get from me in your feed if you press follow, which also people don't think about. I think a lot about, if someone came to my feed and they didn't read the description, they didn't read my name, which isn't likely, would they see from my pictures what I do? And a lot of people also don't think about that. But I want it to be very clear, like, here's what you can expect from me, because that's what building a relationship is all about, is trust. Like, I want you to trust you're going to get quality content in your feed that's going to be about this subject.
Oh my goodness. Those are some really hot tips, everybody. Thank you, Natalie, for sharing all of those Instagram tips. So we'll all have to go back and make sure that we're implementing those things. I think I'm doing
Yeah.
it at this point, but I'm still going to go double check.
Yes, you're doing a great job.
It's a process. Um, so you mentioned that like it was kind of like things like, you were kindling the fire, kindling the fire, kindling the fire, not knowing if it was ever going to actually take off. But once it started to burn, all of a sudden it sounded like it had this like massive leap. All of a sudden you hit some kind of tipping point with visibility. Um,
Yes.
and how did that tipping point with visibility help your business?
Yeah. So I think the reason why I had the tipping point, which for me was being asked to be on this really popular podcast, was because I was very clear on my message, who I'm helping, and how I'm different. And so that's something I always try to help my clients do, is find like what makes you this like special spark that's like different from what's out there. And so I spent a lot of time doing that and building that for myself through my astrology chart, of course.
Yes.
But after I was featured on this podcast, I sold out of all my bookings. I was sold out 3 months in advance. And that before
Wow.
then, I had struggled. I'd be like, next week, I only have one call and I want to have like five or something like that. And so all of a sudden I had all of these people who wanted to work with me one-on-one, and it was amazing at first, but after a while I started to burn out a little bit because I'm like, I can't do so many of these. But what's so great about that is I have like so many more eyes on my work, and they're sharing it with other people, and that's where that exponential growth comes in. You might get a bunch from one like thing that you do, and then those people are going to share it, so it grows really quickly when you hit that point.
Yes, I love what you said about our messaging and our brand story, right? Like that's so important. That's something that I also help my customers with, is like really finding what is our differentiator, what's kind of like our unique point, and like the gift that we actually are bringing to the table, and how to put all of that together. And like you said, like we can easily see that in our astrological chart. There's no guessing anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's still experimentation that
Yes.
needs to happen. And I think sometimes people come to me and they're like, tell me the exact answer. And I give them like this floaty thing. And it's like, what that is it. It's like up to you how you want to express it. It's actually like, to me, it's very clear because, right, I understand it really well. But, people don't always understand. It's an energy. And then
Yes.
you can express that in your own way.
That's why we're humans. We have free will, and we're already expressing our chart, whether or not we're expressing it in like a high vibration. That's another story.
Yeah, or if we're clear that we're expressing it, because you like people come to me and they're like, I'm on the wrong track, and I'm like, actually, I can see exactly why you've been doing what you're doing, but if you want more, there's more for you.
So you've already shared with us some tips on Instagram, but are there any other tips that you'd like us to know with people who are currently struggling with visibility in their brand?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the purpose of visibility would be to like sell your offerings, right? And so, I mean, for most people, that's what they want to do. And so, what I really thought a lot about was, what is it like to work with me? What would it be like? And how can I reproduce that feeling like for free on my Instagram or YouTube or podcast or whatever it is I'm doing? And since I was doing sessions, like video calls, it made sense to do video, which, by the way, everyone, it scared me so much. I'm so awkward, you guys.
You're not. Oh my gosh.
But everyone thinks they are, right? They're like, oh my gosh, my hair was weird, or like I'm so awkward or something. But the more you show up and do it, the less you're going to care. You might not even
Yes.
get better at it. You just care less.
Yes.
So that's one side. And then my podcast is really a way to like have a more deeper connection where I don't have to worry about what I look like, which is helpful. Um, and just talk and, be like someone's best friend in their ear, cheering them on. And that's like also a good way to teach people astrology, right? Because we have to like educate people on why they need what we have to offer. And that's where visibility comes in, is like you have something people want and they're interested in it, so they want to share it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love all of those tips. And I love what you really said about trying to recreate, like on your videos and your offerings, about what it would be really like to work with you, even if they're not working with you one on one. Like, how do you create that? Like, I think that's still something that I'm trying to distill. And that takes time, right? That takes practice.
Yeah, it's tricky because you can have the most amazing offering in the world, but if you can't tell people why it's awesome, why they need it right now, they're not going to jump over that barrier. And
Yes.
so when you're sharing these things, it makes the barrier go down. And even like another way to do that is by offering lower priced items, so that people, like, it's not as much of a objection because it's not as expensive. And
Mhm.
then they know what it's like to buy from you and work with you in that way. And then it's not as like such a big deal if they were to buy one of your more expensive offerings.
Right. They can test the waters, kick the tires a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. Well, we can't have a podcast on astrology without really talking about what's happening here and now with this kind of global pivot, this pandemic that we're in. Not to raise fears or anything, but Natalie, what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's hard not to talk about it, right? It's
Mhm.
like such a important, like front of center thing in all of our lives. So I think it's important that we do talk about it. And it's really interesting because a few years ago, I was kind of looking forward in astrology because I do forecasts for people and I accidentally pressed the year button too many times. And I saw that all the planets are in Capricorn in 2020. And I had thought that in January was when something would kind of like kick off.
Mhm.
And when we kind of passed January, I'm like, oh, okay, it wasn't that bad. Like, silly me. Astrology doesn't have to be so intense all the time, but it turns out that was just the beginning of what we're facing now. And
Yeah.
I think it was January 30th when the virus was declared an international health concern. And that was right around when Saturn was aligning with Pluto.
Hmm.
And that's pretty intense on its own because Saturn is basically forcing us to grow and evolve in ways that are uncomfortable to us. And that often requires like us to let go of things, of life as we know it. And really it's a rebirth, but it's really hard to see that in the moment when you're being told to stay home, and the financial picture is kind of iffy right now.
Yeah.
But overall, like, I always think everything in astrology is positive, and I think that's a good way to look at it because truly we can decide if it's positive or negative. And I'm not saying, of course, I'm not saying like people dying and being sick and scared is positive, but I'm more looking at this from a higher level perspective of, the planet and the universe. And that what is actually happening right now is we're going through a global spiritual awakening. And a lot of us have already been going through this on our own. And so if that's you are listening, probably you're into astrology, you're already like in tune with this empathy and this feeling like there's more to life. But a lot of people still aren't. And so I think it's really our responsibility to share with people, like, be there for them, help them. And because now, like, the fear that we might feel faced like day to day from someone, we can feel their emotions. Everyone's feeling that.
Mhm.
So it's interesting how it's kind of like catching up with the rest of the world. And I think it's a really good opportunity for us all to kind of step up and be leaders and be helpful. And that also makes us feel better, even if you're scared when you're focusing on helping other people. It helps you feel like you're doing something. But besides just Saturn and Pluto being in Capricorn, very close together, because they're really slow. So even when we're past January 30th now, they're
Yeah.
still very close. But the last time they aligned was in 1982, and we had the AIDS crisis. And so this is like one of the great things about astrology is we can see the patterns, and we
Hmm.
can see like, oh, like, yes, it might be time for this thing to happen that is going to help us live life in a different way and evolve to the next level of our conscious awareness in a way we hadn't expected. And then we also have Jupiter and Mars there. So that like
Catching more fire.
amplifies everything. And they're all traveling together for so long, and they're going to go into retrograde in the same area and cross over each other again. So it looks like we're going to be kind of on this ride for a while. But again, it goes back to this idea of like what you focus on grows. If you can focus on helping and being of service and stepping up and, being a light worker, then you're not going to feel as scared, and that's what's going to be spread out into the world.
I love that so much. Some of my friends, I do live in San Francisco. My husband's a tech worker. We know a lot of like biotech people. I know a lot of people who are like not into astrology, like in my closest circle. And we had this dinner party right before we were all told to kind of self-isolate. And I was talking to a scientist friend who's a doctor and he's an immunologist. And I was saying, well, there's astrologers who say like this virus really started back in November. And I was talking about the astrology of the here and now and how this is kind of represented in the stars, that we're like all the events going on right now. And he kind of looked at me and he's like, how did you know in November? Because like that's what his associates were also tracing back to the history of like when this virus might have like jumped from animals to humans all the way back in November.
Yes.
And astrologically, that would make sense, right? Because we're talking about like the Saturn and Pluto that was exact, I think, was it on January 12th or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
But there was like the lead up to it, right? Like the Saturn is moving so slow. So, it's been in orb with Pluto for so long, probably definitely since November.
Yeah, it's a very like slow moving evolution that's happening right now. And when you're in the beginning of any life transformation, whatever it might be, like a divorce, like having kids, like it could even be a good thing. You're like scared, right? But then when you look back, you're like, wow, we really needed to fix our healthcare system. Wow, we really need to fix the
Yes.
government. Wow, we really need to fix these things. So it's really hard when you're in it, but you look back and you're like, okay, there is some good that came out of it. And unfortunately, it takes a long time, especially with Saturn and Pluto. It could take years before you're like, oh, wow, that really helped us get to this place now with these things.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like I feel like right now there's a power grab happening, right? Like anytime like there's some big structure that's falling down, like we've seen it in war-torn countries as well. It's like there's like this power grab. And so like all of like kind of like those negative powers are still like grabbing for things, but the emergence of all of the light workers and the evolutionary workers and the transformational healers, like the people that are listening to this podcast, you and me, like we are really the front line of bringing in this new economy. And to me, seeing like Saturn going into Aquarius, like it's going to be going back and forth over Capricorn Aquarius, Capricorn Aquarius, like that to me is like the ushering of like the new evolution of how we're going to structure humanity.
Yeah, exactly. We're really moving into the Aquarian age more and more, which is about equality, by the way.
Yes.
And this is like we're all on an even playing field here. It could affect any of us. And it really, I think, helps bring us together, even though we're supposed to social distance.
Right. There's other ways, and we're being asked to connect in other ways and connect in other meaningful ways. There's so much symbolism, and oh my gosh, I could talk forever. I could go on and talking about like basic universal income. uh,
Yes.
I think we're not ready for it at this moment, but I can see the way being paved, and just looking at all, like getting excited about everything that's going to be created when people aren't so afraid of a safety net with like healthcare, about pay and everything like that. So
Yeah,
fingers
that's a good
crossed.
point. I think it's also really important to point out that the North Node of future destiny is in Cancer. And so anything that's happening that might be challenging or hard or difficult is really leading us to be more compassionate and nurturing and caring for each other with this Cancer energy. And another side of that is Cancer is the sign of home. And it's like we're not relying on our jobs and our structures. I mean, a lot of us are still having to work, of course, but it's different, right? It's like you're more around your family, and like I'm calling my grandparents every day and being like, are you okay? So that is happening too at the same time.
I love that so much. Um, so wonderful. Would you mind if I took a look at your chart and gave you a little mini reading from my perspective?
I would love it.
When you sent me your birth information and I just kind of opened your chart at the first time, I was like, oh my God. Such a powerhouse. Let's see.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of things in the same areas.
Yeah. Um, well, like when I don't know if you've ever kind of studied celebrity charts and stuff. Um, with your Sagittarius rising and all of your second house stellium there, it's very similar to Oprah's.
Oh, sweet. That's awesome.
Wouldn't it be awesome if you're like the next astrology Oprah? Like that'd be so great.
That sounds terrifying, but I'll work on it.
you're you haven't even you just passed your Saturn return, so like you're just getting into your adulthood,
Yeah.
even though it seems that you've been responsible for a long time. Um, so earlier you shared that that your sun and your moon are both in Pisces, and you were born right before new moon, which is so beautiful to me. And
Yes, the
so,
dark moon.
yes, I love the dark moon. I love new moon. I named my business New Moon Creative. I love everything about the moon, and to me, this is such a powerful place because it's like you're so intentional. Like literally, like everything that you do is based in like mindfulness, and that everything that you do is going to sprout and grow. And like you said, with your sun and your moon being in the third house of social media, but also of just like of literally just like writing and communicating and spreading knowledge to people, like that's such a great powerhouse to have not only your sun, your creative expression, but also your moon, your intuitive emotional expression, so 100% aligned.
I love that.
And then, so thinking about like when you were mentioning when you weren't doing work that was attuned to you, how that really manifested with you getting sick. And that's a really great way for you to know when things don't work for you, is like your body is like telling you, no, let's not do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's the first thing that I noticed in your chart. And but there's also some other things that are to me are about like new beginnings. So to me, when I think about the dark moon, I think of it as like kind of the new beginnings. But you also have these. You have both your midheaven as well as your I always have a hard time pronouncing the imam coli. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
I don't know
that's why
why
I
I
just
can't.
stick with midheaven.
Midheaven and the opposite are both at zero
Oh, I get what you're
degrees,
saying.
right? So like with your midheaven at the top and then across the polarity at the bottom, your IC, both at 0 degrees. And
Hmm.
though that 0 degrees, you also have a third energy at 0 degrees with your Jupiter in the seventh house. So, when I see these three critical places in your chart with critical degrees, I'm like, well, no wonder you're such a superpower. Like, all of this energy for you to me in this lifetime is like this brand new, fresh energy. Like, you're going to go and get it because this is fun and exciting and new for you. And so, with your midheaven at kind of like your public sphere in Libra at 0 degrees, creating beauty, creating peace, and that's how you're delivering everything that you do from this filter of beauty. I think that's so amazing. And of course, you're really good at it because of that 0 degrees.
Oh, I love that. I've never thought about that before, the degrees of them.
Yes, I that was like I when I saw that I was like, whoa. And the reason why Jupiter is so important, not only is just like Jupiter, well, Jupiter is like a great planet that like a benevolent planet that just energy that just expands everything that it touches, but Jupiter is the ruler of your ascendant,
Mm.
right? So earlier when you talked about that idea of collaboration and partnerships, so you are meant to be this inspirational guide, which you are with your Sagittarius on the rising, this guide that really not only inspires but shows people possibilities, right, from this really loving and spiritual way. But in the frame of reference of where you do that best work of being that guide is in your seventh house, and that's where the ruler is, Jupiter, expanding. So when you make a connection with people, it ripples forward more than anybody else. Like it's like for you, it's like under a magnifying glass, which is amazing to me.
Oh, I love that.
um, the other thing that I would really, really, really love to talk about that I don't know if you've ever noticed your double your interceptions of the fourth and the 10th house. Have you ever noticed those?
I don't usually get like super technical with things because I'm more just like want to give people like a quick aha moment, okay, go do it. So this is super fascinating to hear your perspective.
Yay. Well, so you don't have any planetary energies in the fourth or the 10th house. So your fourth house and your 10th house both have the cusps, the same cusp. So you have Libra intercepting your 10th house, and you have Aries intercepting your fourth house, two cardinal signs on your two cardinal houses. And so when you have an interception like this for your 10th house, this gives you the superpower of influence.
Hmm.
Like it is really, really natural for you to be an influencer. That I think that's amazing. When I see people that have this 10th house, fourth house, they're always the polarity, they're always going to be intercepted together if one is intercepted. So intercepted fourth house gives you an emotional superpower, which just supercharges your already intuitive nature with your Pisces sun and moon. But the fourth house, you're getting your emotional intuition, like you said, from your mother and your grandmother. This comes from your legacy, from your roots.
Ah, that is so cool. I've never done that with astrology before. So is it because they're cardinal signs?
It's even more powerful because they're cardinal signs, right? Because you're like doubling Libra, right, on your midheaven as well as your 11th. They could be any sign here, but it's always more superpowered when you have a cardinal sign there because those are always the instigators. So
Ah.
like you are meant to be like you have not only is it an emotional superpower, but you are the leader here. So as you probably mature and stuff, your mom and your grandmother, they're actually looking to you as the leader in the family more so than them at this point.
Hmm. Yeah, I can kind of see that, but I still like look to them as well.
Well, yeah, they're your elders.
Yes.
Um, but in the grand scheme of things, you are meant to be the leader in your family. That's essential, and you just
Wow.
come with like this superpower of emotional maturity and emotional intellect.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we can't not talk about your pileup in the second house. I think I was reading in your bio somewhere about how you're just like always able to, you have all these really great goals, but you're always able to put them all together, like these really practical, even with your kind of intangible, dreamy places. You're like, nope, you have both Mars and Saturn and Neptune and Uranus, like all there helping you get everything organized. And it's on your second house cusp. So you are a natural businesswoman with Capricorn here in your second house. You're a natural entrepreneur. You know how to spin gold out of anything. And so seeing all of these energies here, you have so much to look forward to in terms of building wealth, building a sustainable and responsible business. I love seeing this for you.
Aw, that's so awesome.
Yay. Well, that in a nutshell, that is what I see here. And this is a very, very powerful chart that you have, Natalie.
Aw, thank you so much. It's so like such a pleasure to have you read it for me because it's always fun to get like different perspectives, especially on your own chart because you get so close to it. And you're like, I think I know everything on there, but you don't. You can never know everything on your chart.
You can never know. And then every time you look back at it, you always see something new.
Yeah.
Always. Oh my gosh. So it has been such a fun time chatting with you. And I was curious to know if you have anything special coming up for offerings or in the future that you want to share with us.
Yeah, so I guess I'm writing a book at the moment, but it isn't out yet, so I can't plug that quite yet, but it's in the works. So if you want to just follow me on Instagram at Soulshine Astrology, or come hop over to my podcast at The Cosmic Calling on Spotify and Apple and all those places, you'll kind of get into the groove with what I have going on and what I offer from those places.
Oh my gosh, can I pre-order your book? I can't wait.
Yay! I wish it was ready for pre-order. We're working on it. Now that I'm stuck at home, I think there's a really good chance I'm going to get a lot more done with it.
Fantastic. We can be book buddies too when you're ready. I'm also in the process of writing a book proposal, which has been quite a journey.
It's so hard, right?
And fun and challenge. It's like the right kind of challenging.
Yes.
So wonderful. So yes, please everybody hop on over to the Cosmic Calling, Natalie's amazing podcast. You probably are already a subscriber, but make sure you say hello and catch her on Instagram. And she just has amazing things going on. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we close up this episode?
Oh gosh, so many things, but just thank you so much for having me. And I hope everyone listening feels inspired to work with their chart even more. And, you really can go so far when you're in alignment with who you really are and what you're meant to do. So don't ever discount it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Natalie, for joining me here on my brand new podcast, The Savvy Luminary.
Thank you.
Mahalo for listening to this brand new podcast. If you enjoyed learning about astrology for entrepreneurs, help me spread the word by sharing this podcast with your business besties, and hop over to The Savvy Luminary for links to episode notes and our free Facebook community where you can send me questions about astrology or branding, as well as connect with other like-minded businesses.